and welcome to the Oriire podcast, the podcast that tells African stories. I'm Ceci.
And I'm Halima, and on today's episode, we're going to be discussing about a few Ugandan folk tales. We have a very wonderful and beautiful guest with us today, Destiny. Destiny, do you speak Swahili? That's my first question.
No, sadly, not yet.
What do you speak?
I speak Runyankole, Luganda, English, understand a bit of Rutoro, and I think only speak 2 words of Swahili. So.
Oh, wow.
Do you know that all this time I thought you spoke Swahili?
No, it's more of like, it's more, if you come from the north and Tanzania and Kenya, yes, you can speak Swahili, but not really.
Well, you guys, this is beyond my expertise because I'm not familiar with all these languages. So, please introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Destiny, and I am from Uganda. My mom's a Muganda, and my dad's a Munyankole. So I identify as a Munyankole because in my culture, you have to go with your dad's tribe. But predominantly growing up, I grew up with my mom's side of the family. So my first language was Luganda, and then I came to learn English and all the other languages. And from a very young age, I was always told, like, you know, the traditional stories, you know, like those bedtime stories and everything. So all my stories are told to me in Luganda, basically.
So tell us a little bit. You said Uganda is where your mom is from. What region of Uganda is that?
So the Waganda basically in the central part of Uganda, like near the lake. If you go back like a quick history lesson, the Waganda mainly took up like the Interlacustrine, is it called Interlacustrine region? So like where the Great Lakes are and everything. And then the Banyankole are on the western side of Uganda. So my village is on the western side of Uganda.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to talk about 2 specific folk tales, which Destiny actually told me about. I never heard of these before. And she even contributed an article about them on the Oriire website. So the first one is the Story of Kintu, which I think is just such an interesting tale. Yeah, we actually have a narration of the Story of Kintu on YouTube as well, on the Oriire Africa channel, if you guys want to listen to that, if you're not like a reader. But there's also an article about it on the site as well. So Destiny, why don't you tell us a bit about the Story of Kintu?
Okay, so the Story of Kintu is from the Baganda, who believe Kintu was the first man on earth. You know, if you know the story of Adam and Eve. So basically, Kintu was the only man on earth. It was just him and his cow, and he drank milk from her. And one day Nambi came down from heaven with her 3 brothers, and she saw Kintu and she fell in love with him. And her brothers were so upset because they were like, how can you be in love with this man from earth? You know, when they went back to heaven, she told her father all about him. And her father was also upset, just like her brothers. And he was like, no, I don't want you to be with him. Her brothers come back down to earth and they steal his cow, which was literally the only thing that was giving him food. And they take it back to heaven with him. So when Nambi was walking around her father's garden, Crow, she sees the cow and she noticed that, you know, that is Kintu's cow. So she was really upset because she was thinking, oh, my poor love is going to starve to death. He needs food and everything. But when Kintu discovered his cow was gone, he, you know, just started eating wild berries and fruits and all that and everything. So that's what was sustaining him. So Nambi comes back down to earth and she, you know, she's very apologetic, really sorry for what her brothers had done. And she was like, you know what, let's go to heaven together so you can get your cow back. So she takes Kintu back up to heaven, and her father was, again, really upset with her because he was like, how dare you bring this man from earth up to heaven? But he was like, okay, if you want my daughter, you're going to have to pass 4 tests. So the first test was to eat a lot of food. So he tells his servants to bring like hundreds of baskets of food, like no normal human being could finish all that food. And he puts him in a room in a hut somewhere, and he's like, the guards will be outside. There's no way you're going to throw away this food and anything. So Kintu eats 2 baskets. He's really full. Then a mysterious hole appears in the ground, and he just throws the remaining food in that hole, and it closes up. So the father, by the way, is called Gulu. So Gulu comes to these servants, and they're like, "What? You finished all that food?" They looked everywhere, but they couldn't find the food. So the first test was done. Gulu was still not pleased. So the second test was to get him firewood. But he was like, "I have no use for firewood, so I want you to take this axe and get me rocks instead." So Kintu goes out and he looked at the rocks and he was thinking, okay, if I use this axe to cut these rocks, the axe is definitely going to break. So he starts to observe the rocks really closely, and then he notices that there's some cracks somewhere. So he handpicks them out and he takes them back to Gulu. But Gulu was still not pleased. So his third task was to fill a massive pot with dew from the grass. And Kintu goes to bed and he was so worried. He was like, how the hell am I supposed to fill a massive pot with dew from grass? So he goes to bed. He wakes up really early in the morning, still really upset, worried about how he's going to do that task. And he found the pot mysteriously filled with water. And there was dew on all the leaves of the grass. Gulu was still not pleased. So his last and final task was to find his cow. So Gulu had like a massive cow, obviously, and there were so many cows, but they all looked the same. And so he tells Kintu, your last task is to find your cow. If you find your cow, you can take my daughter with you down to earth, and I'll give you a lot of presents, and you guys can, live happily ever after. So Nambi starts to cry, and she's like, that's an impossible task. How is he supposed to find his cow? The cows all look the same. But then I think it was a bee. Yes, a bee flies to his shoulder and whispers to him and says, the cow that I land on is your cow. So the bee leads him to his cow. He gets his cow. Gulu was pleased eventually, and he tells Kintu, you know what, you can go with my daughter. He gives him a lot of gifts, grains, poultry, and all this, just so he could start a life on earth. And he was like, you have to hurry before her brothers come. So in these brothers, there was one particular brother that Gulu did not want to find out that Nambi was going back to earth, and that was her brother Walumbe. So they get all their things, they make their way back down to earth, but then Nambi forgot the grain, so she runs back up to heaven to get the grain. But on her way back, she finds Walumbe, and Walumbe is like, okay, I have to come with you now because you're my sister. There's no way I can go without you. So he follows them back down to earth. In the Chiganda culture, Walumbe basically means death. And I remember reading this book when I was 5 or 6 years old. And honestly, looking at it now, like the image of Walumbe, it's not that scary thinking about it now. But as a 6-year-old, it's really, really scary. I think that was my first introduction to horror stories, because Walumbe basically used to live under the bed waiting for Kintu and Nambi's children so he could take one of them. And it basically just means, he was death. Like if a child dies, Walumbe has taken them. So that is the story of how the world was created, how life was formed, I guess, on Earth. Although it doesn't really tell you how Kintu came about, why it was just him and his cow. Like there's no explanation for that.
Yeah. Oh, that's very interesting. I know someone whose last name is Walumbe, but the person is Kenyan. So does that really, his last name means death? Or does it mean something else?
I honestly don't know.
Wow.
I honestly don't know. To be honest, I'm not sure if the name actually means death or just Walumbe as a person is death. But I can't, because it's been a very long time. I can't say for sure Walumbe means death.
I have to say that is such an interesting folktale. It's like a saga. It should be a movie. I think the version we have on the site is like an abridged version because it doesn't quite tell like the details, like the 4 trials or whatever. But I think that would be a really interesting and funny like movie or cartoon or something.
I think there's a movie, I'm not too sure, but I think there's a movie somewhere. Yeah. And then now, so that's the that's the Baganda, the Chiganda story. Now, the story of how the world came about in my culture, the Banyankole, it's Ruhanga is God, basically. Ruhanga had a little brother called Ncha, who was absolutely restless and bored. And he kept telling his brother, I need some company. I need something to, fill up my time. So Ruhanga decided to, I think he planted 3 seeds on earth that turned into calabashes. And these calabashes, within there, they turned into calabashes. And then 3 boys came out. So one was called Kairu, one was called Kahima, and the other was called Kakama. And then in order for them to, go out into the world and have a purpose, he gave them a test. So he filled up their calabashes with milk. And he told them, I'll give you your purpose if you wake up the next morning with these calabashes, filled with milk or whatever. So the 3 of them, tried to talk to each other and everything to keep themselves awake at night. And the first one, Kairu, slept, dozed off and poured his milk, half his milk spilled. And then the other 2 brothers felt sorry for him and gave him some of his milk. Then Kahima, then I think they stayed awake till morning, and then Kairu lost all of his milk. Kahima lost half his milk, and then Kakama had all his milk by morning because he had gotten milk from his 2 brothers already. So when Ruhanga came, he basically cast, I want to say cast Kairu, he doesn't exactly say cast, but he told him, you'll forever be a slave to the world, like, like toil.
Very interesting turn.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Like basically you'll be toiling the world and all of that. And then for Kahima, because he had half of his milk left, he was like, your purpose will be to look after other people. And then for Kakama, he said, you will be the ruler of all the land. Which I found really unfair because the little brother had spilled his milk and he had gotten some milk from his brothers. But yeah, that's a bit of the folklore.
So between these 2 stories, I have to say personally, I like the story of Kintu because that had, some romance, some action, some drama. It was a saga, But I think that the general theme, if you're looking at it, and that's the theme with a lot of like African folktales, is work smart, not hard. And also, what's that stupid phrase they say? Favor is better than labor.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I think it's kind of a horrible lesson to teach kids is that, like, look, don't work hard, just hope that you just magically get what you want.
One thing I also found interesting with these stories, is that with most African folktales and even like religious stories and everything, is like every like myth or every folktale or every religion, they have a story of how the world started, and it's like each people believe that that's how the world. So I'm like, do we exist in different dimensions, or are we like? It's just very. I'm like, everyone thinks their own version of the story is correct. It's just really mind blowing,
Yeah.
This is how it is with religion as well. Everyone thinks it's their own.
Yeah.
And everybody's looking at the other person like you are going to end up.
And I'm like,
who knows who
to end up in the same place?
I think that it is kind of a testament to human narcissism in that, like, we always think the real story of creation must have something to do with us. It must be. It must involve us. It can't be from another place. No.
Yeah. No, I know one culture that believes the first man of earth came from a mountain, and I think those are from the eastern side of Uganda. I can't remember the story right now, but I just know the first man came from a mountain. Is it Mount Elgon? Can't remember. But it just makes you think, like, how did everyone just sit down and think, okay, this is the story, this is how man came to earth. But then, there's one more story I wanted to tell you that kind of interlinks like the Luganda and the Chinyankole folklores, which I found. So it's basically Kintu and his 3 sons.
Okay.
Oh.
So Kintu had 3 sons, and they were all called Kano for some reason. They all had the same name. So every time he used to yell out, I know.
Just could not be bothered.
So every time he would yell out, Kano, not take out the trash, because obviously they didn't have that lifestyle. Every time we say, Kano, go and milk the cow, and no one would do it, or cannot do this, someone would just not do it. And then if he asked, why didn't you guys do it, the first one would say, oh, I thought you meant it was the second one. The second would be like, oh, I thought you meant it was the third one. So it was just like a back and forth.
That's valid.
Yeah. So Kintu consulted Ruhanga, who he considered like the wisest of them all. And I think you can see the link between the cultures, because in my culture, Ruhanga is God. So he goes to Ruhanga and he's like, yeah, I need help with naming the boys, because this is the trouble I'm going into. So Ruhanga tells him, you know what? Give each of them a pot of milk. And then whoever keeps the pot of milk the next day is how you'll be able to name them. So it's basically the same story that I said before. And the only difference is, I think there's only one name change. So Kairu and Kakama are still the same, but instead of Kahima, they have Kahuma. So it's basically the same story. The youngest boy who gets milk from his siblings ends up being the ruler. The eldest ends up being the slave to the land. And then the middle child, since he had half his milk, I want to say he's more like a peasant, because his role is to feed and look after the others.
I want to say I have a grievance, with not even just African folk tales, all the folk tales and folklore and whatever, even Christian religions, the Bible. Why are they always favoring the younger child, please? What is the problem? What have we done? I find it so offensive as the eldest child. What was the meaning of that? Really? All the time. Always the older one.
I honestly don't know, but if I read these books religiously growing up, it would teach me to be very selfish, because I would just keep thinking, if I help this person, then I'm not going to be rewarded for being selfless.
I agree. And it's odd, because they do try to teach moral lessons, like work smart, not hard. But at the same time, aren't they kind of teaching kids to be kind of awful? What kind of lesson is that? Don't help your brother, otherwise you will suffer. I mean, is that really what they want to pass across?
In some articles, is because a lot of these stories, they're from pre-colonial times, entering colonial times. So it's just advising all these people on how to work smart, so they won't be the oppressed, or cause they're the oppressed, they need to find a way to deal with their oppressors. So if that makes sense. So it's just saying the older sibling, for example, is the white person that's colonizing them, and then the younger sibling who is being oppressed has to find some ways to outwit the older one or something like that. So it's just about oppressor mentality.
Well, I see it differently. When you put it through the frame of colonization, now it's making me be because that's kind of how people ended up selling out their family to slavery. So they're basically encouraging the younger brother to sell out
wiser
siblings.
Yeah,
that's kind of awful. That it makes it even worse.
It really does when you think about it, because is your life all about struggle?
But it also makes me think that the young ones are very conniving. And I want to say conniving and evil, because if they were helped, then they should help the others as well.
Exactly.
In that time of need.
Yeah.
So, when the other person didn't have all his milk, he could have been like, you know what? Let me give you half, so we all will have half. Half a pot of milk.
I feel like that's the kind of lesson you teach kids. That should be what is in their books.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
No, definitely. So.
Do you think the story of Kintu and the lessons it tells and everything, do you think it affects modern day Uganda or Buganda, where you're from? Do you think people take these stories to heart and then perform it in their everyday lives? Because some people are crazy. You'll be surprised. You would be surprised.
Probably not conscious, at least.
To be honest, I wouldn't. I can't answer that because I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I know that in the Buganda culture, Kintu is believed to be the very first Kabaka of Buganda.
And what's Kabaka? What does that mean?
Kabaka is the king of Buganda.
Oh.
So, and the Baganda love their Kabaka. So I also just wanted to say my mom comes from the clan, the Mpologoma clan, which is basically the Kabaka's clan. But that's
listen, we all, We just give you premium guests. Premium.
It's just a name. We don't get Duchess of Windsor treatment kind of thing. Well, I wouldn't, because technically I'm not my mom's culture, my dad's. But
that is another thing we should address one day, is that why are you only your dad's culture in Africa in general? Because that's the same way in Nigeria, for example, is that you like wherever your dad is from, that's where you're from.
Yeah.
And I find that like ridiculous, because I am equal parts. I'm 50-50, and I can claim whichever one. And they don't apply that same rule to like mixed race people, for example, or people from two different countries, because you can claim both countries. But within the same country, they separate based on tribe, which is ridiculous. Anyway, that's a topic for another day.
I mean, that also goes hand in hand with why, if you got married, you have to be Mrs. something, but the man cannot be Mr. I don't know. Like, you can never know a man is married, but you'll always know that a woman is married. So I don't know. I think it's just one of those things.
So it's a mix of sexism and like tribalism and everything.
Yeah, definitely.
All the ills of society.
I skimmed through this article that said the first Kabaka in Uganda, I think in Buganda or Uganda, one of the two, he's actually a direct descendant of Kintu, and he's not a mythical figure, he's actually a real person. So it just also made me think that, well, maybe Kintu was real, who knows? It's probably more than
that's what they say in all countries though. Like in for example, in Yoruba culture, don't they say that like the king is the direct descendant of Oduduwa? Yeah, so they all say that they're the direct descendants, but are they really?
We have no way of knowing. Maybe like every dimension had like their own first descendants come out from there, and then I don't know. But then it's hard to tell, because the Banyankole, Baganda, everyone from the Ba, whatever, comes from the Bantu. I can't say tribe, but the spread was spread all over Africa. So I know there's traces of the Bantu in Western Africa. There's traces of us in Southern Africa, Northern Africa. So like if I try to speak if I try to speak in my language, someone from Zimbabwe could probably understand a few things. So long as you come from the Bantu, what are they called? The Bantu group.
I think ethnic
Bantu
group,
peoples.
Yes.
Yeah, ethnic group. Sorry, yeah, Bantu ethnic group. So,
and another interesting
if we all come from
we're wrapping up. Oh, okay. Another interesting thing with what you said is that Buganda was an unidentified territory when Kintu was a person. So it could have spread as wide as like Tanzania, Kenya, and all these places. So it's just like you said, do we really know like the extent of it and everything?
Yeah, we really don't. And then if every Bantu tribe is claiming to have the first person coming from the tribe, then how come we're all part of this ethnic group?
Yeah.
How did that come about? So yeah.
This has been actually really enlightening and interesting. I like listening to stories like this. Thank you so much for coming on, Destiny, and for sharing these folk tales with us. We've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
So thank you for listening, guys. If you liked this, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And also, please follow Destiny on Instagram, Des_Mugasha. So that's DES_MUGASHA. And also follow us on Instagram, where we are Oriire_Africa. That's ORIIRE. And we're the same on Twitter. And make sure that you go to our website, oriire.com, where we will be discussing this. And we have many articles, and we have an abridged version of the story of Kintu. And you can also follow our website to go to YouTube, where we have a narration of that and other folktales as well. If you want to talk to us about folktales from your culture, we would love to have you on the podcast. So you can send us a message through our website or email us at info@oriire.com, and we would love to hear from you.
Yeah. All right then. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.